Hello, hello. Those of you in the bleachers in the back, if we could come up here. I want to welcome you guys back to our afternoon programming, and this next discussion is really only for the sports elite. You guys will be hearing from Dodgers president and CEO Stan Kasten. You'll be hearing from San Francisco 49ers president Al Guido, is also the chairman and CEO of Elevate, and Gillian Zucker, the CEO and chairman of Halo Sports and Entertainment, which not only includes the Clippers, where she's also the head of business operations, but the historic LA Forum and this fabulous building you are sitting in right now, which has already been repeatedly nationally recognized as the best arena in the NBA. Joining them will be Daniel Zweben, a managing director at Moelis. So please help me in welcoming them to the stage.
Great. So maybe we'll start off, Gillian. We appreciate you and the Clippers hosting us today. You know, I was here for Game 4 a few weeks ago and couldn't have been more impressed with the building and the energy. Maybe to get us started, can you share a little bit of the vision behind the new arena and how you're thinking about redefining the in-game experience?
Game 4. Oh, that was rough. Where's Kevin's out here somewhere. Congratulations to them. Amazing series. And we are glad you were there because it was, I think, the culmination of everything we sort of set out to do, which is really just to create a place where you have a sense of community. All of these sporting events, I think, are really about that. But when you're starting from scratch, you get an opportunity to do it in a way that's meaningful to modern day, the way that people live. And I think people spend so much time with their head in their phones and their head in tablets or on computers or with screens watching the many streaming platforms we have, and that, you know, sometimes to lift your head up and just be with people in a place that it makes you feel bigger than yourself is really important. So that's really what the building is about. We're so glad to have you all here, and thanks to Sportico for coming to visit, and all of you.
So you're all presidents of some of the greatest franchises in your respective leagues. Maybe talk a little bit about the role of president and how that's evolved over the last few years or over the last decade.
Okay. Well, I really have been around for most of the evolution. When I started, I'm the dinosaur on this group. I really was a young GM, and back in those days, it was the conventional understanding what a GM does. You run everything. So I was in charge of business. I was in charge of the team. And my role has continued over the years. I would say I think modern-day presidents are different. Modern-day presidents seem to have gravitated more just to the business side, which makes all the sense in the world, because why would we think someone who is the best that he could be on the team side would also be the best that he could be on the business side? They're very different disciplines, so I agree with the modern bifurcation of those responsibilities, because both are big, big full-time jobs.
Yeah, just to build on Stan's note, I think the business side, if you just look at the asset value increases over time, right? Just in the league in which I represent, I think it's a 15% CAGR just from the time, you know, the last 5 years. And so these businesses just dramatically change. We're sitting in a fantastic building, and the infrastructure cost alone make you operate in different ways. And I think that depending upon who's in the room or what team and league that you represent, not only now are you doing, quote unquote, the blocking and tackling of the business, selling tickets and suites and partnerships alike, you may be at a team that has a venture arm. You may have a real estate development, right? You may have other teams in which you own, platform teams. We talk a lot about this. And at Elevate, I have obviously investors in Josh and David who have a plethora of teams in which they operate. And so just it depends on what league you're in, what headwinds and tailwinds you might see. But I just think the sophistication level in which these assets are now operating and just the size and scale of which they operate, it truly is fascinating. We just understand the power of our brands. We're still small, call it businesses relative to our employee headcounts, but our brands are obviously so much bigger, and we've been more sophisticated in monetizing them over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'll echo what Al just said. I think these jobs are different depending on what organization you work for, what league you work for, what owner you work for. And I just think back 10 years ago. I mean, when I became president of the Clippers, Steve was so excited about this idea that we were a tenant in someone else's building and we didn't have to worry about running it. And I had come from motorsports where I had built several facilities and run operations, and it was a big part of what I did and what I was excited about. And I remember in the interview sharing all of the things that I would be able to contribute when he wanted to start building a new arena. And he said, "We are never building a new arena. This is one of the reasons why I love this team." And then after a few months of being in a building where he realized you got somebody else's colors, you're subject to somebody else's culture, you really don't have the kind of support that you want for your team. You have people who work there who literally root for somebody else.
There's no wall.
Right, there's no wall. So all of those things were things that made him say, okay, this is what I want to do now. And fortunately for me, I was able to grow in the role because I already had that background and experience. But I think initially this job was really a marketing job. It was really about marketing, selling tickets, selling sponsorships. And now, obviously, so much bigger than that. It became a development job. It became a construction job. It became a vision job. It became a brand job. We acquired the Forum. We had to learn the concert business. And so then it became multifaceted where you're balancing multiple different businesses in different locations. We have a minor league team now, our G League team located in San Diego. So all of these things added to the complexity of the role. So when you think about the job of a team president, it could be the one I had 10 years ago, or it could be the one I have now, or it could be one that's equally complex or even more complex.
So maybe following on that, at times you're put in between the sports side and the business or the finance side of your organizations. Maybe just talk a little bit about how you keep alignment and peace between the two.
Well, in my case, first of all, we have a business that has grown a lot over the years, but the hub is always going to be the team on the field. That's what enables all of the spokes to grow out from there. Every decision we make about players, even if they have their own following, say in Japan, the only thing that would matter to us as the first thing is what can they contribute to the product on the field? Because if that works, everything else works. Now, about aligning the needs of both halves, there's no business in the world that doesn't have that, okay? The artists are always going to fight with the bean counters, right? That's true in every business. If you're making widgets, the people who really care about the design of the widgets are going to fight with the people following the money. So that's not unique to sports. It's just, making sure everyone understands the goal, understands their role in achieving the goal. And when you need a referee, that's what we're here for. But you'd be surprised, we don't have to referee nearly as much as you would think.
In some cases.
In some cases. I agree with Stan a lot. The one piece I definitely agree with is it needs to be a unified strategy. I always say wins and losses are, in other business would be considered market conditions. You can't, especially in the world of football, right? Given injuries and just the sheer nature of the game, the competitive balance in that league, you will eventually lose. It's just part of life. And so as you think about building your strategy and your business as a San Francisco 49er, it has to be about the business as you see it. And then you adjust to on-field performance over time. I saw Demoff in here earlier, so we have fun jokes about local EBITDA margins. But in seriousness, there has been a spike. And in the league in which I guess my day job is at the 49ers, not my Elevate job, but my day job is, it's a little bit easier because we do have a fixed salary cap. And so at the end of the day, 48.5% of the revenues are going out and they're going to the players. And so the reality is you can find competitive advantages, but everybody gets to put the same money on the field. So then the competitive advantage becomes in your coaching and your training, and those things have exploded over the last couple of years. And I don't say that in a negative way. I say it in a positive way because, Parag Marate once said this, and I loved it, which is the hero feature has always got to be the hero feature, and the hero feature is what's happening on the field. the court, the ice, the diamond. We're all benefiting from that, because if not for that, none of us would be in this business. That's what the fans come to see. And so it's okay that they probably live under different metrics, so to say, than maybe the business side. And if you're in our seat, you just got to understand that the actors and actresses, that's who they are. And that's who people come to see. And that's who we need to support, because that's frankly how we get to do our jobs in our business at the tail end.
I think the way we view it is also around competitive advantage. And it's this idea that there is a competitive advantage when everybody's on the same page. And I am so fortunate that I have two amazing partners here. Lawrence Frank, our president of basketball, who is absolutely incredible, and Ty Lue, our head coach. And literally the two of them would do anything to help me achieve my objectives. And I know that they know that I would do anything to help them achieve theirs. And this building is kind of the manifestation of what Steve believes about how important it is to have these groups work together in tandem. The idea that we're all here in one building. Our business offices are here. This is where we play our games, and this is where our practice facility is, so that we run into each other every day, that we're around each other every day. Literally, true story. I had a salesperson who was a little down in the mouth. He's one of my top guys, and he just needed a little lift. And so I said, "Hey, Ty, any chance you could come coach him up a little bit?" And he was like, "Sure." And literally comes up 2 floors in the elevator and starts walking through the sales floor, not just pumping him up, but everybody else around us. And I think having that kind of atmosphere and that kind of single-pointed vision is the thing that just helps you all to achieve more.
It's got to be great for culture. So maybe shifting, international growth and expansion continues to be a goal for virtually every major sports league that we work with. Can you talk about the importance of international growth, and given everything going on in the world right now, whether it's trade and tariffs, what impact is that having on your business?
Well, for us, we are at baseball. We are way behind the other sports in exploiting what we might be able to do internationally. When I was in the NBA 25 years ago, David Stern got our finals on TV in 200 countries around the world. Okay, we didn't have to play exhibition games in 200 countries. We had eyeballs in all those countries, and you see the explosion of that sport's popularity. Football, you see the inroads they've made, particularly in Europe in recent years, and now they're going to other places. So at baseball, we're at the beginning of that. There's been a lot of talk about us really strengthening our ties to the Japanese market at the Dodgers, and that has been tremendous, because they're not just the second biggest baseball market in the world. They're an important market. If you could pick one anywhere in the world, they would be right up. So we have made, inroads. We have some games in Europe now. We are looking at other parts of the world where our game is not well known. So it's a long-term project, but I think we've done and do a decent job of getting local dollars and getting domestic dollars, but the world out there is so big and holds the prospect of even more money than we make domestically, and so that's an extraordinarily important goal of ours over the next decade or 2 or 3.
I agree. In the NFL, I think they've done a very good job putting games on in other markets, and that's been successful. What is probably slower, and they just rolled out what they call the Global Markets Program, which it gives us the ability to sell our rights and marks in other countries. And so the 49ers have Mexico, the UK, and now the UAE. It's slow from a revenue perspective. It's really small when you look at what we're doing in our local market, but it is definitely, it's not just an international game. If you think about it, certainly for the 49ers, we have 10 games, 70,000 people, 700,000 people. The reality is we have a 30 million person global fan base. So there's a much larger tail out there than just the people that go into our building. Now, I do think that we're going to have to play games in these markets to have real traction. And so I know the commissioner stated what his ambitions are for the league around the amount of games that we actually move internationally. And, if we ever get into a situation where we're 18-2, how we might think about that. The 49ers have talked about, whether or not if you get to fewer preseason games, do you even play them in your markets? We've seen what the NBA's done. playing preseason games, frankly, in the U.S., maybe overseas, but taking that, call it friendly game, and putting it in a market, and that's how it's been able to build a fan base. So I think it's really important. I just think you got to be patient. And then for the teams themselves, you got to be willing to invest in those regions. I guess the good or the interesting part about football, American football that is it's hard to think about it being played on a dominant level given how global football or soccer is such the dominant sport elsewhere, and we know NBA inroads have meant. But the advent of flag and where that's at in this country now, being a high school sport for women and men, being played in the LA Olympics in 2028, it does give us an opportunity that has a low-cost barrier to educate people on the game of American football, which I think changes it. And then your last question, or the last point on tariffs, I think it's just interesting. There's a lot of noise out there, but you know this at Moelis. Like in North America alone, and I think I'm being conservative, there's roughly $20 billion of infrastructure projects planned in just the next 5 years. And that's the ones that are public. I go around every day and talk to a bunch of different teams or a bunch of different universities, and like there is no slowing down of that. And so, if you think about economic downturns, the one thing that, maybe not the one thing, but certainly a constant is sports and entertainment. Sure, brands might pull back money spend, but the reality is butts are in seats. It's just how many and at what cost. And sports has always been that outlet. And so for me, I really don't see, you can get caught up in all that political noise, but the reality is, I'm thankful now Leeds is now in the Premiership, but like sports fans are coming out in droves. And we've never been more popular, frankly, in any of our sports if you just look at the media deals that have been done. And so I just don't see a slowdown. Maybe pull back here and there, but I don't see a tremendous pullback.
Well, I'm going to start by disagreeing just slightly with Stan's premise that they've got a lot of catch-up work to do, because I was in Tokyo a few weeks ago, and you could not walk 10 feet without spotting a Dodgers cap.
We're good in Japan.
Yeah,
we're good in Japan. Yeah.
Pretty spectacular. Congratulations. Really amazing. I think when I think about international, one of the things that I really think about is the opportunity here in LA, just because of how many people visit this community every year. So you're talking about plus or minus 50 million visitors that come to Los Angeles every year. And that kind of visitorship, they're looking for things to do. They're looking for concerts. They're looking for sporting events. They want to come tour these facilities. And they're very excited about them because of the global nature of these brands. So that's something I think that we're really looking at, is how do we continue to double down on that, to speak to those audiences and to let them know when we have something in the market, because we know if they're aware of it, that they'll come participate. So I think that's, kind of the main focus that we have for this. As we look at the NBA, I think they've done an extraordinary job at really globalizing the game. It's truly, a global game. And if you look at even our players, how many international players we have. So when looking across the leagues, you see things like these theme nights, like these heritage nights that really tap into those communities. And I think in this way that sports has a unique opportunity to provide, a sense of inclusiveness that, is lacking in so many ways in this world today. So I actually think it's promising what we're able to contribute.
So maybe shifting to innovation, and Gillian, you hit on this a little bit at the start. Maybe just talk about how each of your organizations is thinking about embracing innovation, both on the court or the field, and then how you keep your finger on the pulse of everything that's happening, whether it's emerging tech or other things in sports culture.
I mean, I can start. We've gone all in on this. I mean, some would say we've lost our minds, right? So for people who are not aware, when we built this building, the idea was that we wanted to make it like your living room, that when you came, that you had a great view of the game, that if you were hungry, you would go like you would in your kitchen, go to a refrigerator, open the door, pull out whatever drink you wanted, walk back to your seat. You wouldn't have to interact with anyone. You wouldn't have to have a conversation. You wouldn't have to stop to pay. That when you come into the building, you would walk in just like you'd walk into your living room, same with clubs, that the entire experience would be this frictionless experience that would be almost like magic. And we set out spending the next, I would say, about 3.5 years, and George Hanna, our head of technology, is in the room. He gets all the credit for it, he and his team, building exactly that. So we've spent the better part of the last year perfecting it. I can tell you on day one, it was about, probably somewhere about 75% effective. And by the end of the season, it's more like 98, and we'll be at 100, I'm sure, by the start of next season. But, it has been a game changer for people. Literally this idea that can you take technology and architecture and eliminate everything that people complain about when they come to these big events, that you don't have to wait in line, that you can actually get up if you want an extra beer at that concert, go get it, and be back in your seat without missing a song. And I think that's really the concept of what technology is able to provide. It's just getting exponentially so much better. And we tried things that we didn't know how they'd be received. Our Game Face ID technology. Take a selfie of yourself, put your phone in your pocket, and be able to go wherever you want. It's your entrance into the building. It's your ticket. It's how you pay for things. You just pay with your face, and you keep walking. And this idea was something that we thought, will people embrace it? Our goal by the end of the year, could we get to 40% enrollment in Game Face? And after the first week of the season, we were like almost at 70. So this idea that not only was it something that people would embrace, it was something they were desperate for. And I think that as we're moving forward, now we're realizing we have a lot of information. We have a one-to-one relationship with every single person that comes into this building. So instead of knowing 1 out of 4, so you come in, you have 4 tickets on your phone, we know who you are, and you swipe for your remaining 3 guests, we know who all 4 are. And now the question is, what do you do with that? And that's where we really have a tremendous amount of work to do. Now, we had one opportunity to be able to figure out, we've got this information, what can we do with it? We decided that we were going to bring some of the members of our wall. We have a standing supporter section, and we decided that we were going to bring them to Denver to Game 7 just to give the guys a little lift. And then we thought, okay, there's 500 of them. We're only going to bring 125 of them. How are we going to decide who? So we have decibel readers in our ceiling. We have the Game Face ID when people walk in, and so we know when you arrived. And we also know how many games you came to. So we sent out a note. We said RSVP, and here's how we're rewarding them. We are going to reward to the people who came to the most games, who came the earliest, and who cheered the loudest. And we actually knew that information. So it was really exciting, I think, for me, that here was the first example of ways that we could utilize this data to be able to reinforce the behaviors that we wanted from people. And I think that's the opportunity that all of sports has moving forward.
I think everybody's taking notes for how to behave next year.
I once said during COVID that I don't know that COVID changed anything. It just accelerated everything. And I feel the same way about technology now. Is that the reality is how we interact, as Gillian just referenced, like how we interact with a place is entirely different. And I think the majority of the changes outside of what you've done mostly probably happen off the court in just the speed in which you're able to operate. And so if you adopt, call it whatever, I know the buzzword is AI, but if you think about it, I have a large creative division. It's changed their lives in a good way. How quick they're able to develop renderings, content, get it out. On the G&A side of our ledger, what might happen in a finance or a legal department, how quickly you have access to that information. I'm staring at Ben Gumpert and Chris Alphin, Ben who runs our Insights division, and he will say, I think he would say if he was up here, is we always understood to a degree the power of data. I think what I've learned over time now and really building a proprietary platform at Elevate called Elevate's Performance and Insights Cloud is that data layer is so fantastic, but now being able to add an intelligence layer over top of it is really what's game-changing for all of us and just our knowledge of our fans, what our brands need to spend money on, what the rate of return is for them. And so all of those systems and technology platforms are just making us all a lot more efficient. I don't know yet that it's actually taken away from a job function. I just think it's accelerated those job functions. Now, I will say, you do need a blend of art and science. And you asked this question earlier about the relationship between maybe football or sport and others. And I just saw Coach walk in. I'd be interested to say, he's obviously done a fantastic job in marrying what I'm sure his R&D department does relative to player scouting and ranking and all those other things, but what his coaches may see within the scouting tape. And so I don't know that you can over-rely on any one of these. I think a true blend of art and science is what makes the best operators or the best decision makers in the world. I think for my thing is hopefully with COVID, I used to joke with my dad, he had no idea what a QR code was until COVID, that now the adoption of all these innovative platforms, we're just faster to adopt them so that we all get better at doing our jobs on behalf of our constituents.
I have a little different. Both of these people do phenomenal job in their markets with their buildings. I have a little different perspective because I'm working in a building that is 65 years old. Think about that. Most of us have never been in a building that's that old. And so I do have those physical limitations. Yes, we have facial recognition gates. We started the year with 3. We now have 4. And so we're doing those kind of things. What we have focused on instead is outward, not just the interface with our customers. We looked at, once we established our brand, we looked to brand extensions. And we took our competencies in what we do and built companies that would be going out there and advising other teams and other businesses. We have a company that does, our team is known for its baseball analytics, and we have an army of those people. But we have an awful lot of people that do business analytics. And so we started a company. We're advising a dozen professional teams right now. Janet Marie Smith, who's our head of plant and development, we started a company called Canopy, and she is into venue and experience design. We're doing those kinds of things, and we have other examples of that sort of thing. So we are taking what we do and going out using the Dodger brand. We started a women's hockey league because we know how to do that kind of thing, right? And so that's how we look at how we are adapting to the new world.
Great. And maybe time for one more. Let's end by talking about community. When I talk to team owners, they often refer to themselves as stewards of community assets. And, few things, and how you hit on this, really have the power to bring community together quite like sports do. So can you just talk a little bit about how your organizations are looking to deepen ties in the community, and what are some of the strategies that you've used to advance that?
Yes, no problem. And you're right. I think I always simplify this as if it's the last place in the world that you could be sitting next to a complete stranger, and generally if you're wearing the same color uniform, that you're high-fiving with someone within 5 seconds. Like, that doesn't exist anywhere. I mean, we're all got our heads down in the coffee shops anymore. So I do think that community, that fandom is special in sports. The 49ers have the largest nonprofit in the National Football League, and really tied to two initiatives. One, education. In all of the U.S., but certainly in California, there's low-income families, and so we have our own STEAM education platform. We have 8 full-time teachers on staff. We run 60,000 kids through our classrooms that sit inside of Levi Stadium. And the second leg of that stool is really performance or participation in youth athletics. And certainly flag is a big component of what we do. I'm blessed to have 3 girls, 16, 14, and 12. And I always say you certainly need a good amount of IQ, but you need a good amount of EQ. And there's very few places that you can learn that than not on the football fields or the soccer fields or the basketball courts. Learning how to be a teammate, being active. We know everyone's on their phones. That's what every parent deals with, and it's difficult. And so I think keeping them active, keeping them playing things, keeping them in their communities, that's really what our goal is. And so I'm proud of work that I get to do on behalf of the York family. And you're right, I do think it's everybody's responsibility to get back to the communities in which they serve.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think that it is extraordinary what teams across the board do in their communities in order to engage. I'm going to focus on, how these teams kind of come to answer the call when really terrible things happen. And we had one here in LA with these horrific fires that hit in early January. And I think that when you look across the board at what organizations do, but specifically because Stan is here and what the Dodgers have done in terms of stepping up, and I'll speak to our own piece of that, which was we received a phone call from Shelley Azoff, and she and Irving had been discussing literally once the fires hit, as all the rest of us were thinking about, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? The place is burning down. She's thinking, how can I help? And she said, look, I'd love to get, a couple bands together and maybe we can do a concert and raise a little bit of money to help fire victims. And this was before we knew the extent of the devastation. So that quickly steamrolled into what became Fire Aid, a 2-building, 2-venue concerts that essentially brought together the music industry, the who's who of the music industry, and was televised by every streaming partner. But the kind of community support that came together in order to do something like that, and I think it's only these kinds of organizations that can do this. We put together these events all the time, and so we have all of these internal experts at each of these various things, and to be able to stand up something like that in 3 weeks, people were like, how is it possible that you could have done it? But the reality is, any team could have done it. These are the types of people that work for these organizations, and it's one of the things that make them so special. And, at the end of those 3 weeks, when we were able to look back and realize that we had raised $100 million to help the community, I mean, that was something that I think made us all realize the power of this industry and also the responsibility that comes with it. And I know that these two gentlemen that are joining me on this stage representing these organizations, they do equally powerful things, and I feel like it's because of teams like this that it's elevating all of the other ones to say, okay, we need to do our part too, and it just makes the world better.
First of all, these two teams do extraordinary work. I do want to make one observation. What you've heard here from all of us, and we all agree, was not the case 10 or 20 years ago, okay? This is kind of a recent development in the development of our businesses. I have always been lecturing, when I talk to corporate groups, I think the three things that are in common, it's your product, your customer, your brand. When you're building a team, it's your team on the field, it's your stadium experience, and it's your community relations effort. That's your brand building. And that often, until 10 years ago, that was kind of left behind. But it's always been not just about doing the right thing for your community, it's just good business. Because when you are connecting with a community program, whether you're at a school or at a library or at a hospital, or these big ticket items that these teams do, you're establishing a bond with your customer when they're not in the stadium watching the game, when they're not on their couch watching the game. This is why they stick with you during your down years, which we all have. Or this is how they are more inclined to take an offer when they see a coupon. Oh, let's go to the game. It's establishing that makes it really good business. And I don't think that was appreciated well enough until the recent, the last decade or so.
Well, thank you all for being with us today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you to Sportco.